Good afternoon, my friends. This is Paul, and today I'm going to be reviewing to you Super Mario RPG for the Nintendo Switch. Just as a heads up, if my voice sounds a little bit different than usual, it's because I have a little bit of a cold, so if there are awkward jump cuts, that's probably to avoid a bunch of coughing. As usual, when I'm reviewing a remake, I like to go over the changes made, just in case you're wondering if you should pick up the new and improved version. Since I didn't play too much of the Super Nintendo version, I think I got about halfway through. Most of the information that I've learned is from game FAQs, so thank you guys for that comprehensive list of differences. The most obvious change is of course the visual overhaul. It still has the same feel as the Super Nintendo version, like it's still isometric, the characters are still short and stubby, but all of the graphics have been improved so that they are in HD. All of the textures have been reworked so that you can see stuff like reflections on shiny floors or torches flickering more accurately. It honestly looks really, really good, and some of the best graphics I've seen on the Switch. While the great amount of visual storytelling that defined the original is still mostly present, they have added a few new cutscenes in 3D to make certain scenes feel more dynamic. The menus and UI have been completely reworked so that they look a lot more modern. I know some people are not going to be thrilled with this change because they like the style of the original, but personally I feel like people would have complained if they didn't change it because then it would have looked out of place with all of the modern enhancements. There's now an entry where you can view dialogue about the monsters you've defeated, and most of this dialogue is really hilarious. Sometimes it breaks the fourth wall, sometimes they bring up questions about how the enemies function, and I ended up using my screen capture to get a lot of these because I only rented this game from GameFly and I wanted to make sure I remembered the hilarious entries. You also have a new journal option so that the characters will describe their thoughts on major story events, and this can really help if you're not sure of where to go next, which that was really helpful for me because sometimes it wouldn't be clear or the characters wouldn't repeat the essential dialogue. Quite a few enhancements have been given to the battle system. For instance, when you first start doing a new maneuver, there will now be an exclamation mark icon to help you get the timing down. Once you're really good at it, then the exclamation mark will disappear, but then it'll reappear if you start flubbing the action command. You also see exclamation marks appear when it's the appropriate time to dodge an attack. There's now a special shield that appears if you perfect dodge, and that makes you take 0 damage. There's also a meter on the left side of the screen that fills up with every successful dodge or attack action command. As you build up a chain, you can also get additional buffs. And when the gauge fills to 100%, you can do one of 2 maneuvers depending on how many people are in your party. If you have less than 3, you can do what's called a Toad Assist, where Toad will make a treasure box appear, and depending on the timing of when you hit it, you'll get some kind of bonus, such as refilling all your health, or a Star Gust, which is basically like a final smash that attacks all the enemies. However, if you have 3 party members, then you do a special move that's fully animated with a brand new cutscene that deals massive damage to one or more of the enemies, or in some cases is more of a healing defensive maneuver. All of these are a joy to watch and are beautifully animated, although you can skip them if they get too annoying. And it's different for every combination of party members, so it encourages you to experiment with the layouts that you can see all of them and see which one fits your playstyle. Maybe you want to be more defensive and you'll want Peach and Mallow in your party, for instance. Sometimes when you're successful in an action command, it damages all enemies instead of just one. This is very situational. The trailer made it out as though it constantly happens, but it's really only when the game feels like it. I thought I was doing something wrong at first because it didn't seem like it did it, but no, it turns out it's mostly just RNG. However, the enemies that you're not actively targeting won't receive as much damage as the main one. Most of their damage that they'll take will be in the double digits. One change that probably only I'm going to appreciate is that the game no longer reminds you what weapon you're equipping when you target an enemy, because I always thought that meant, oh, the enemy isn't carrying a weapon. But it turns out that that was referring to your active party member. So no more, this character is unarmed, when it's actually that it's showing that it's your weapon, which I always thought was weird in the original. All of the music has been completely reworked by the original composer, Yoko Shimomura. Although, if you prefer, you can still switch to the classic soundtrack anytime you want. Although for some of the cutscenes, it'll switch to the modern music anyway, but at least you get to hear most of the original music, and in some cases, you can even directly compare the two. I really love the new music. Most of it was performed by a full orchestra, and it sounds absolutely glorious, as though that's what the original game was supposed to be all along. There's a new breezy mode option, which you can switch back and forth between it and the normal difficulty whenever you want. That makes it so that the battles are easier and you can carry more items. I actually never tested this because I've heard that the original game was already too easy, and I can confirm it is a very easy RPG. I never found myself running out of items or had to restart a battle, but the option is there just in case you don't like Square Enix's style of RPGs. You can now carry more than 999 coins, which is really helpful at a lot of those shops. I think you can carry up to 9,999 in this remake. There have been a few tweaks to inventory management, such as being able to use items on the field by pressing X, or to even use magic spells such as Mallow's Healing Rain whenever you want instead of waiting for there to be a battle. There's now a fast travel option, which is mostly not very useful in the main quest, but one thing that's been added to this remake is that when you go back to Mario's house, there's now a box that stores all of your excess items. The game now autosaves, although those save blocks that hilariously make you jump into the air are still there, just in case you're a purist. Some of the names have been altered, such as Toadstool being given her proper name of Peach. Frog Fuchsius is now simply called the Frog Sage. Honestly, I prefer Frog Fuchsius, that actually sounds kind of funnier. I've also heard that some of the dialogue is changed. I haven't played enough of the Super Nintendo original to really notice, but some of the things that Game FAQs pointed out is that most of it is due to certain words being offensive that weren't as offensive in the original, or cultural references, such as one character making a James Bond reference. Obviously, now that you're playing on a joystick instead of a control pad, it's slightly easier to move Mario around in the isometric view, although I would have appreciated maybe the option to change the camera, as the right stick is completely unused. It does look a bit weird that underground areas or like interiors of a house just have a weird black border around everything as though you're in a void. I get it, it's stylistic, I don't know what else they could have done, but it still feels kind of jarring when the Paper Mario games didn't really do that. They just had a stage, which made it seem a lot more natural. Speaking of stages, you now appear on a stage instead of just a void when your characters have a level up. There's now an additional post-game that unlocks an in-game soundtrack player, yeah baby, and you can even switch between the modern and classic arrangements. There's also a records option where you can see what your biggest scores are on some of the mini-games, or how many consecutive jumps you've done with Mario's jump ability. Why does that have to be an ability? Mario is known for his jumping. You can also refight the bosses in much tougher scenarios. From what the trailers showed, some of them even have one-shot KOs that deal 9,999 damage. What is with video games and not liking the number 1,000? Are they prejudiced against 1,000? Let's get some 1,000 rights, will we? I think those are most of the major changes that are necessary to hear about. So now, since I've never reviewed the original Super Mario RPG, let's talk about what the game is like in general. So this was the very first Mario RPG, and obviously it was a testing ground for later games. It was made by Square Enix, so therefore it felt a lot more like a Final Fantasy game than what the Paper Mario games did. When you're in battle, you can have up to 3 party members, with Mario being consistent. You'll select which enemy you want, so there's no distance parameters like there were in the Paper Mario games where, say, the hammer could only hit the enemy in front. Now you can hit any enemy you want. If you time the A button just right, you'll be able to give additional damage to the enemies. These are called action commands, and I presume Square added these because in the Final Fantasy games you kind of just stood there and hoped that the attacks would be effective, whereas now you can take more of an active role in the battle. You can use items to turn the tide. Each character has various special moves, although to do this you'll have to use flower points. These special moves also have special input, such as pressing the A button at the right time, holding it and releasing it, and my least favorite, rotating the control stick. I thought Nintendo learned from the lawsuits that they received from Mario Party 1. I guess they forgot the warning to not use the palm of your hands, so yay if they face another lawsuit for this game. When the enemies attack, you can dodge the attack by pressing the A button at just the right time. The timing window has been slightly improved so that you can do a partial guard if you press the A button a bit too early, but if you're perfect, then you do a perfect dodge. Some attacks can't be blocked, and thankfully there's text at the top that'll say, "You cannot block this." Most of the time, these are like special moves that hit the entire party or some kind of status effect. Characters can turn into mushrooms or scarecrows or be poisoned or scared, and these offer some kind of compensation, but at the same time will also limit your abilities. So for example, when you turn into a scarecrow, the only thing you can do is either defend or use special moves, so you can at least still use special moves. When you're a mushroom, you'll gradually restore your health, but at the same time you also won't be able to do anything else. When you're poisoned, you'll gradually take damage, but you'll still have access to all of your special abilities. So none of the status effects feel totally unfair to use. You can also swap in and out of party members during battle, and if your party is wiped out, then they'll swap automatically. And when you win a battle, you'll get experience for your entire party, so even those that are on standby will still be able to get experience. When a character levels up, you will upgrade all of your statistics, so unlike the Paper Mario games, you can still choose which to buff up, your attack and defense, your health, or your magical attack and defense, but you'll still get the other stats buffed up, you just have more of an option of which one you want more of. On the overworld, you move in an isometric formation, and you initiate battles by simply walking into the enemy. There are no first strikes in this game, and there are no starting the battle by hitting an enemy the wrong way, such as if Mario jumped on a spiked enemy. If you touch the enemy, it starts a battle. No one gets any preemptive strikes. Sometimes the enemies do, but they'll get that whether you initiate the battle or not. So you can jump on a spiked enemy and it won't really make a difference. The enemies aren't really aggressive at all. They're kind of just minding their own business. One thing that I found is slightly annoying is that if there are a bunch of enemies on the screen, they won't just huddle together and form one enemy. Like for example, say there's 4 enemies in a row and you attack one of them. Then when you exit the battle, there'll still be 3 more, and sometimes you'll just be automatically into another battle because you didn't have time to move out of the way, and it can be a little bit tedious, and it's definitely a sign of, yeah, this is a Super Nintendo game. They didn't iron out all of the problems that Square Enix battle games tend to have. Obviously, if the game were nothing but battles, it would be pretty boring and tedious. And even though there's a lot of battles, and they can sometimes get drawn out, especially with the same battle theme playing over and over again, and it keeps restarting during every battle, to break it up, there are platforming challenges, and there's even a story. It's not a very involved story, but just like the Paper Mario games, there are usually mini stories in each area that you'll have to solve to progress towards your overall goal. The story itself isn't particularly grand, but what makes up for it is the hilarious dialogue. Of course, there's also a lot of visual storytelling, which is kind of hard to explain, but basically the characters do a lot of pantomiming and running around and over-the-top expressions, when Mario tries to explain something to someone, for instance, he can temporarily transform into Bowser and do a lot of jumping and falling, and somehow the characters know exactly what's going on. And if you, as the player, had been paying attention to what Mario was referring to, then you can probably follow along as well. And it's a great attempt to give Mario an actual voice without him actually speaking. One thing that I find is a bit weird is that this remake still doesn't have voice acting, which is especially jarring in the cutscenes because they'll have like subtitles at the bottom and sometimes you can see the characters' mouths moving, but it'll be absolutely silent and it feels like it kind of detracts from the experience. Nevertheless, I really loved the writing, I really loved the visual storytelling. I thought that it helped the game to feel really charming and kept up the humor that the Paper Mario games became known for. If you're wondering why I keep comparing it to Paper Mario, it's because Paper Mario was a direct result of wanting Super Mario RPG 2, but after Nintendo had the falling out with Square, they had to completely rework the game to become Paper Mario, and then it became its own thing developed by Intelligent Systems. So this remake is sort of a return to form, with Square Enix serving more of an advisory role, and also just giving us hope that perhaps Mario RPGs could go back to the way they were, as this game had quite a lot of unique enemies and unique characters. You have no idea how refreshing it was to see Toads with gender expressions and ages and families. I know that seems like such a low bar to cross, but Nintendo was absolutely adamant about that stuff for the longest time, so it felt so cool when there was a kid Toad who said, "Mom." It's like, wait, there's married Toads? And they have genders? And mustaches? It's so incredible that Nintendo is willing to go back to normal character development. And yes, you could argue that it is a remake, but there have been remakes in the past where Nintendo has been stingy about preserving the original character designs. For instance, in Mario Party Superstars, they removed all of the crazy character designs from the first 3 Mario parties and replaced them with their generic designs. So the fact that the developers preserved these original characters is so refreshing. However, I think that this remake overall is more suited to people that had nostalgia for the original, as opposed to being made with newbies in mind. There are certain moments of the game where it felt like it was a byproduct of its time and it lacked some of the modern conveniences that I've grown to expect in modern gaming. Again, I'm not really sure how to word it without putting it into spoilers, but some of the stuff I already mentioned, like being able to run into 4 enemies in a row on the battle as opposed to them just ganging up together in one battle, or the battle music repeating itself every time you get into it. There are some puzzles in the ship area, you'll know what I'm talking about, that are so devious that the game even gives you the option to give up, which is a nice quality of life improvement. There are some platforming challenges that require really precise jumping, and the isometric view does not help. And there are just these little annoying things that added up where I thought, oh, yep, this is a Super Nintendo game alright, and they're trying very hard to preserve that original intention. However, it still wasn't enough for me to hate the game. I loved the humor, especially the visual humor. I liked all the unique characters and wacky scenarios. I liked the graphics, I loved the music. I thought that overworld exploration was okay. It wasn't a huge focus. The parts that I didn't like were when you went underground or in a temple. Those felt too much like mazes, and there's not really an in-game map to help you through it. Thankfully, that only happened maybe like twice, and then I quickly got over it. I thought that the battles had a nice flow to them, as once you got the hang of the action commands, then you could string together so many combos that the enemies didn't even have a chance to respond. So again, just like what I said with Persona 5 Tactica in my previous review, when the battles flow really nicely, it feels very nice to feel like you're a master at the battles. And the game rewards you for that by filling up the gauge so that you can have more buffs and do more damage and eventually do those wonderful triple moves. I really liked Super Mario RPG, but I wouldn't say it's as good as the Paper Mario games. It has certain charms that the Paper Mario games don't, but I feel like those games refined the formula and have an overall tighter battle system and more modern touches. But that's not to say Super Mario RPG shouldn't be picked up. I think if you're more okay with the Square Enix style of doing things, then you're probably going to really like this. Now this goes for $60, as is the case for most Nintendo games, but I think it's worth it if you want to support Nintendo going back to the way Mario RPGs used to be instead of the sterile, all these toads with different colors, ooh. However, if you're not trying to support Nintendo and just want a good game, there's always GameFly. You can always rent it like I did, or wait for it to go on sale if that ever happens. But I think that you're going to have a great time if you're able to put up with Super Nintendo logic. However, if you've grown up in this era, you're probably going to consider it a return to a bygone era, and you'll probably love it way more than I did. Again, I liked this game a lot, but there are definitely better Mario RPGs out there in my personal opinion, but I think you guys will absolutely love it. So with that, thank you very much for watching. Let me know down in the comments what you think. If you have nostalgia for the original, let me know what it is that I'm missing. Maybe you'll offer a new perspective that'll help me appreciate this game even more. Special thanks to my patrons Matthew Rakowski, Sploonghost, and Splatcat for their continued support. And until the next time, remember to keep the faith, stay epic, and God bless. Bye!